So now you live in New York now.
Mm-hmm.
So why did you move to New York? Talk about your background first.
Yeah. Okay. Originally from the Midwest, grew up in a relatively small college town called Normal, Illinois. Shout out Illinois State Redbirds, go Redbirds. And got to Chicago as quickly as I could. Went to undergrad, DePaul University, which is where we met originally. First day of school.
First day of school.
That's right. And been friends ever since.
Yeah.
Which is
Cheers.
Cool. Pretty cool. Yeah. Cheers.
We're in my apartment drinking mezcal right now.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe has some herbal tea.
He's once it's done steeping. Are we done with the steep yet?
See, I like everything I drink to be really strong, so I let it marinate.
Okay.
If that's the appropriate term.
Yeah, sure.
As long as possible. So.
Okay. So maybe another 30, 35 minutes.
Maybe when we're done with this podcast.
Okay. Hopefully sooner than that. So undergrad at DePaul University in Chicago. So that's 4 years in Chicago. And then after a brief stint living abroad in China for a year, came back to Chicago and lived here for 4 or 5 years. And for me, I've just always been drawn to big cities. And I don't think there's a specific reason. I think there's a lot of reasons. I just really enjoy meeting new people. I have a lot of different interests, and it's easy to just flex all those interests in a big city because there's a lot going on, right? And after living in Chicago for, let's say almost 10 years, New York started becoming a bigger destination, and I just kept thinking more about it. Through the end of my time in Chicago, it became like, okay, like I love New York. I would travel there as often as I could. I would make every excuse either to visit friends or through work trips, and it just kept gnawing at me. I'm like, I gotta get here. I gotta move here.
Okay.
It really was, not to be the cliche, chasing my New York dreams, but that really was it for me. New York was the mecca for so many things, for art, for entertainment, for Broadway, business-wise. It really is the mecca for a lot of different things just for a lot of different things. And I just wanted a piece of that. And I also knew that I wanted a piece of it before I got too old and had too many responsibilities, right? Mm-hmm. New York is a great place if you're young, you're healthy, you don't really have many responsibilities, family, obviously the biggest thing.
If you're rich. It's a great city if you're rich.
That too. And yeah, this just kept gnawing at me. And I remember, I don't know what year it was, but I was working here in Chicago, and I wasn't super thrilled with where my job was going, and also had kind of the point in my relationship where it was, either shit or get off the pot. And I kind of had this not quarter life crisis, but I certainly did a lot within a short amount of time. And so I decided to leave my job, and that was kind of the tipping point for, okay, if I don't have anything else holding me here to Chicago, now's the time to move to New York. And so I kind of made that decision very quickly after deciding to leave my job here in Chicago. And looking back, I'm so glad I did it when I did.
Yeah.
And
because you've been there now for a year and a half, 2 years?
2.5 years.
2.5 years.
2.5 years, yeah. So I moved there in December of 2017, right before 2018. And it's been everything I want and more. I moved there having a few friends from college and from work, but I really didn't know too much about the city. And when I first moved there, I was only working part-time. I didn't have a full-time job yet. I really did, kind of take a leap of faith and just kind of wanted to plant myself in the city of everything when I got there. And it was really fun moving there without having a big commitment work-wise, because it allowed me to explore the city, meet new people, connect with old friends or old colleagues that I haven't spoken to in a while, and just kind of use the city as my playground for the first 3 or 4 months. And got to be a tourist as well for those first 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. And it was super fun going to parks, museums, just exploring, getting lost. I can say after It's crazy. It's been 2.5 years. Obviously, it feels like a weekend, but it's been everything and more that I've wanted it to be. The energy, which I haven't mentioned, but probably should have let off with, is it's exactly that. It's this energy that's unmatched, and you feel it as soon as you land or as soon as you get into the city. Even during COVID, you still feel that energy that just permeates around every street corner, around every neighborhood you go to. And it's infectious, right? And I think that's another reason why I wanted to move there is I'm a big believer of just surrounding yourself with people that inspire you and push you and just make you a better person. And so I felt in Chicago I did that really well, and I felt, how can I take it to the next level? Right?
Yeah.
How can I level up? How can I just heighten the scenario? And New York was the natural next step for me. I just really wanted to, implant myself in the center of it all, and I did that, and it's been great.
So what are you doing there now? Describe to the listeners.
So outside of I have a job now. I have so my full-time job, I work for a startup sneaker brand called Koyo, Koio, Koyo.co. I'm the director of marketing and e-commerce, so I get to sink my teeth into a lot of different creative elements. We are, a young, hip millennial brand. We do a lot of photo shoots and video shoots, which I get to have a huge part in, which is really exciting for me, and just exist in. I wouldn't say we're a traditional fashion brand like a Louis Vuitton or a Gucci, but we still operate in kind of similar circles, which is really fun because I can, our office is in Soho, New York, and I live in Chinatown, so I walk through Nolita and Soho to Chinatown, and sometimes I still pinch myself on the way to work, thinking that this is my life, right? This is kind of what I aspired to do. This is why I moved to New York. Working at a fashion brand in downtown Manhattan is just still a very cool feeling. And again, that was by design. And actually thinking back to when I was job hunting in New York, I remember a big important factor for me was where the office was located. I knew I didn't want to be in Midtown Manhattan because I just didn't want to be around that crowd.
What's the difference between Midtown and like Soho?
So Midtown is more so, I would say, for Chicago vibes, like more like Loop, right? So very like buttoned up. Think like the Chad, the Patagonia vest, the chukka boot, the khaki pants, the cookie cutter. There's a lot of finance and big ad agencies, just not as much.
It's like big corporate.
Yeah,
right?
Big corporate. Yeah. And so I didn't want to be in one of those like kind of cookie cutter big business brands. I've always gravitated towards these kind of smaller niche things. Like even in Chicago, working at Interior Define, a small furniture brand, our first office was in Wicker Park and then Lincoln Park. So never really like downtown Loop or other big corporate centers. So it was by design to try to find a company or a brand that again fit what I was looking for. And again, just very fortunate to kind of wind up there. And yeah, still just so cool to walk around Soho. And that's it's just cool to see the unique people walking around and like what they're wearing and how they interact with the world. Me having just a general interest in fashion and art and culture, you could make an argument that Soho and the West Village, neighborhoods that are very close to one another, that's where a lot of those people exist. And that's where a lot of those, I guess, like A+ players you could call exist in the world, right? It's downtown Manhattan, it's London, it's Paris, potentially Tokyo. And again, just like being able to sit there and just like people watch is so fun. And I get to do that on a daily basis, just strolling around my office. And that's part of why I love New York, and even on the weekends, just like walking around and just taking in the city, right? Just being a sponge and just like walking around and observing, going to cafes, going to bookstores, going to museums, just trying to
absorb everything.
Exactly. Absorb everything. And one of the great things about New York is its density and how close everything is to you, and it's a little ridiculous.
Not great for a pandemic, but
not great for a pandemic, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. But the density, I think, is one of the best things about New York City, especially my neighborhood. So I live in Chinatown, which is very close to the Lower East Side, and again, I work in Soho. So my world is literally very small. It's a very small bubble, which I acknowledge, but I also love that. I love the diversity and how I can walk to anything and everything I want within 10 or 15 minutes. World-class art museums, grocery stores, bodegas, basketball courts, just parks, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge. It's all right there, and it's not hard to access. And I think that's one of the great things about cities and urban environments is just the accessibility of everything and the accessibility of a lot of different things. Chicago is a great city, and I have so much love and passion for it, but at times it is difficult to navigate. It is very segregated, right? The diversity, you really have to go outside of your way to see that and to feel that, whereas New York, it shows up right in your face. If you take the train, if you take the MTA, it's unapologetically in your face. And me personally, who is a bit more introverted, I have to physically put myself in moments and experiences. Otherwise, I'll just kind of, be too much to myself. Yeah. So again, that's all by design. And New York, again, just has all these things right at your doorstep, quite literally. And it manifests itself so beautifully. And even during a pandemic, I can say without a doubt that energy, that accessibility, that diversity, that culture, everything that New York is, it still exists,
Yeah.
Not at the scale as it once used to be, but if you compare it to any other city in the States, it's still there. That energy is still there.
So I've visited Joe 3 times now in New York over the past year and a half, I would say. And so the first time I went to go visit you, this was February 2019.
Okay.
And February 2019. And so we get there, it's like February 4th.
Was I in Manhattan at that point, or was I in Brooklyn?
You were in Manhattan.
Okay.
So you're living in Chinatown, and so I get off the plane and I come to Soho, and I usually travel on weekdays because I bartend on the weekends. So everybody's all working and Joe's at work. So I show up and it's like 60, 70 degrees.
Nice.
And so we're on Broome Street and I'm walking, and so I just have to kill time. So I go to Washington Square Park.
Beautiful.
And there's like this arch, and there's all these different types of people, and it's this beautiful day, and people are playing the piano. There's a piano there, and people are like just doing all sorts of different things. Yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, just sitting there watching people, is like, wow, this is like the human experience all right here, and that's such a cool thing. I have a Yankee hat up here, Yankee hat, and it has MoMA on the side. I got it at MoMA. That's why this hat is so special. What I do wear it around Chicago. The reason why I wear it in Chicago is because this happened to me actually the other day. So I'll wear it at work while I'm bartending, and I'll get customers start like trash talking me, like, "Why are you wearing that Yankee hat, man? This is Chicago." And I'm like, that's what I want. I want to agitate Chicagoans so that it brings out that spirit of Chicago, that competitiveness.
Interesting.
Of like, yo, New York, this is Chicago, man. Screw New York. Like, you don't wear that here. And I really love that. And I intentionally wear it to try to bring that out.
Yeah.
But it's also, too, you talk about it just being this, like, mecca of so many different things. And I went to Paris back in January, and you see people just wearing a Yankee hat. Like, they're not wearing any other American things. And that's, like, the cool thing is, like, this is America.
Yep.
Like, so the hat represents, while I wear it here, it represents, like, America in a way. And that's why I have it back here, kind of on this bookshelf, is because it does represent America to the world. New York is America.
It's still one of the most valuable and most recognizable brands in the world, I would say. after America and American culture, I would say New York is maybe right there next to America. Because I feel like whenever, especially foreigners, think of America, they think of New York, LA, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I bought a Yankee cap maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I went to a Yankees game before I lived there, and I would wear it all the time around Chicago just to, like, again, remind myself that, hey, like, you should go to New York at some point. And I would get so much shit all the time. But I wore it as, like, a fashion statement, right?
Yeah.
Even though I'm a huge White Sox
fan.
It
is a fashion statement.
It is. I mean, Jay-Z and so much culture, similar to kind of what Chance tried to do with the Sox cap, I think, in his social experiment, which
he's not even the first one to do the Sox hat. That was like Dr. Dre,
NWA.
Yep.
Which is still very much like a fashion statement, the Sox cap, but not as much as the Yankee cap.
Right.
And I would get so much shit for it wearing it in Chicago, and especially when I went home to visit my parents, because my parents are huge Sox fans. They're like, Joe, what are you doing? And I'm like, it's a fashion statement.
I'm sure parents love hearing that. It's a fashion statement.
Yeah. But even one other little anecdote, when I was thinking about moving to New York, I would obviously visit there like a couple times a year to visit friends and stuff, but I would always keep an MTA card in my wallet, even when I lived in Chicago.
Interesting.
Just as like a little reminder.
Like a little subtle.
Yeah, a little kind of like subtle hint of just a reminder, similar to the Yankee cap, but a bit more subtle. Or I used it as a bookmark when I was reading. I definitely had New York in the back of my mind, and it just kept clawing at me and gnawing at me, and I just knew I had to get there at some point.